All right, welcome in everyone. It's another weekly edition with BTB Analytics and special guests for the first time all season. I will not bury the lead. We will get him a full introduction just on the other side of this. You know the drill. We got game matchups. We're talking angles, best bets, and everything between. Let's start the show.
Give a damn about a hater when I feel like it. Not today, not today, not today, not tomorrow. Get out my way, please. I'm trying to get paid. Not today.
Yes, the first round of the college football playoffs are here. And so why not, no better time, in our opinion, than to bring in our first guest of the season, and a very special one at that. So joining us for this episode is Parker Fleming, aka Stats War on Twitter, or the X, whatever you call it these days. If you're not familiar with him and you like football and are into analytics, then you're living under a rock. Featured CFB expert on the BetUS TV show and co-owner of collegefootballinsiders.com. Parker, how you doing, man?
Kevin, Seth, great, man. Really excited to talk to you guys, and got a ton of, brand new territory here. We've never seen a playoff like this, and so a lot of fun stuff to think about and get into these games. So thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure, man. We're excited for the conversation here. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of the first round matchups here, plus a little bonus one. Let's start off with that. And how about with the Army and Navy game? So let's pull that up here. So this one, I mean, how doesn't get more classic than this? Go Army, beat Navy. Seth, you're going to be at this game. So
I'm going to this game. I leave Friday. I'm super excited. I'm going with my father-in-law who's in the Army. So we're going to have a blast. It's also the 101st Army Navy game, and he happened to be a colonel in the 101st Airborne. So it's like double whammy. First Army Navy game for me. It's going to be cold as hell, but I'm not going to be able to complain because I'm going to be around super alpha. So, I'm getting as warm as I can, while I can. But no, this is going to be a good game.
Yeah, agreed. So this one, we don't no official model play for us in this one. We don't show an edge. This currently is at 6.5. We make the number 7. Actually, opened technically at 4.5 in favor of Army over at Circa. Yeah. I want to maybe just kick it off to you, Parker, to get your initial thoughts, and then we can kind of kick it back and forth here. So again, classic matchup where every year possessions are at a premium for this matchup, right? And Army, we just know what's going to happen. Army is going to try to run the ball with their high potency rushing attack. So what's your visceral take on this game, and who's going to win?
Yeah, I'm showing a similar kind of lack of edge on the side here, except in the more conservative direction, a little bit more favoring the underdog. I'm at like 5.5 here, so not a huge differential there. I will point out I did go to this game last year. I think it should be a bucket list item for every college football fan. Go with someone who went to Army or Navy or who served, and just have a good time. It was great walking around the parking lots and get to see folks and just experience it all. It was truly a great game day experience. But yeah, like you said, I think last year, depending on when you bet, the over did hit pretty late there and was a competitive game. So obviously, throughout the timing in the week, the over means something different. But I don't have an edge on the spread here. I do have kind of a lean towards the over here, just because the quality of these offenses is reaching heights that we have not seen from the service academies, before. Navy is 45th in opponent adjusted EPA per play. Army is 22nd. Again, just a descriptive metric to say how well they've played given their schedule. And when you break that down, Army really, really solid against the rush and in the drop back, 10th in EPA per rush, 8th in EPA per dropback. Navy's 34th and 33rd in rushing and dropback on offense as well. So a lot of potency out of both of these offenses. Obviously, a ton of rushing from these two teams. Navy is 132nd in my rush rate over expected metric. Army is 134th, where being at the bottom of that list means you're rushing more. It's exactly what we'd expect out of both of them. One thing to watch for me really is kind of where the rubber meets the road is Navy's offense versus Army's defense here. Navy's offense does not generate quality possessions well. I call a quality possession metric ECHL, named after a Navy fullback, ironically enough. So this is the game for it here. Navy's 119th in ECHL rate. Their Army's offense is 73rd. So that's 33.3% of possessions. Navy's generating a quality possession. Army's allowing a quality possession on only 41.5%. But in terms of finishing those drives, Navy is 5th, 4.68 points per quality possession. Army is 16th, 2.97. We saw that North Texas game, for instance. I think North Texas had first in red zone like 3 times in that game and came away with no points. Just a really, really good bend don't break. These offenses are very, very good on both sides of the ball, and you see that kind of finishing ability from Navy's offense should test this Army's defense a little bit. So I actually think the over is interesting here. It's low enough. You hit 40 points. Both teams just scrape and flirt with the 20s. You're doing okay here. It feels like sacrilege. It feels like I'm holding my nose a little bit, disrespecting the troops. But I think we're going to get some points this year. These are not your grandfather's Army Navy offenses, right? They're modern. They're moving the ball around. They got some athletes, and I'm interested to see how that translates into game state here. But I'm on the over for this one.
Yeah, and I think the current market's sitting here at 39, opened at 41, so we're seeing a little bit buying down, but this would be maybe the floor, and you're probably going to see or might see some buyback.
Is the weather going to be bad?
For Army Navy, I think it would be considered perfect. I think it's supposed to be like 35 degrees. I don't even think it's supposed to be overcast. Game starts at 3, so I think this is just going to be. I don't think weather is going to play a factor. Yeah, I don't have any. All the numbers that I highlighted, you highlighted for us, Parker. I couldn't agree more with that analysis. The one thing I did want to ask you, and we've struggled with these two teams in particular, and it's kind of funny that we're here at the end of the season with how we look at these rosters because of the service academies. They don't recruit like normal, and it's a little bit more difficult to kind of quantify how talented these rosters are not. And this feels anecdotal, and if it is anecdotal, this Army roster seems to be a little bit in that next level tier, but maybe not as Navy. But for us, we're kind of having to use similar forecasts for these talents, and I think that's playing obviously a role in the forecast for us and showing no edge. So curious on how you look at these specific teams from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you want to use talent, and one talent means a lot of different things. And in this game, it probably means as little as it does anywhere in college football. And I've tinkered around this year with trying to weight the talent composite, not just to say, let's weight the best recruit the most, but let's get some positional importance in here and how we can kind of tinker that. And, a little of this is looking backwards, but it was like, oh, Alabama actually wasn't number one. Like they were stocking up positions, but there were some clear weaknesses in where they were accruing talent. And I think that's one way to kind of get about that from a modeling sense. Obviously, I think of it as coaching a little bit in this game, more so than talent. Like, what are they doing with the raw materials? Because the raw materials are coming from a relatively limited array of possibilities here. And Army coach Matt Drinkall, cool guy on Twitter. If you're not following him, just took the Central Michigan job. And so there's a question, how's that going to affect them in game? I'm a little bit of the opinion that offensive line's a little bit more like, hey, get the snowball rolling. You do the work in the offseason. In season might not matter as much, but certainly something to keep an eye on there for Army, the Joe Moore finalist line that's played so well together. Both of these teams, know their tricks, but it does feel like every year each offense comes up with something else that we haven't seen. That's interesting this year because both offenses have looked just different and really funky. They've played common opponent and looked are common opponents and have looked good and bad against similar opponents. So wonder if there's diminishing returns on that there. In terms of talent, you look at like playmakers. I mean, obviously Bryson Daly or Carson Daly, as ESPN likes to call him every so often in a tweet there. I think Bryson Daly and Horvath, Blake Horvath are very, very good quarterbacks. I think they're very different quarterbacks. And that really is where, if you wanted to be on a side, I think if you were going to trust the numbers in this one and kind of trust a talent edge, you'd say, I think Daly's a better playmaker than Horvath. Not to mention, Horvath is a little bit banged up and has been uncertain. Obviously, I think he's going to be geared up to play for this one. But it's really, you have to look at it at units and just kind of think, okay, does the run defense matter here? Does the offensive line cohesion, who does that favor? That favors Army. If there is a playmaker or ceiling, who does that favor? And that's going to favor Army as well. So that's where you start to push this from, hey, I've got a slight lean to, okay, maybe that's the direction I would go, is you start to look at how these units have played together this season.
Yeah, that's a great answer. For me, it's hard. I think I have to go just in that lean with the Army. They do seem to just have that extra little je ne sais quoi this season. But the commonality I think that sticks out in my mind is they both got pretty beat up against Notre Dame here. And so when you think about that real next level tier of talent and 4 and 5 star high proportion blue chip ratio teams, they didn't stack up. Both of these teams didn't. So what will that mean here? Obviously a lot on the line for bragging rights. And I think you're right. You're going to see, I was talking to my father-in-law. I was telling him like, hey, we don't want Army to win too much here. We don't want them to go to the playoff because then, they might not care about this game. And he's like, oh no, they'll care more about this game than the playoff itself. I thought that was funny. So yeah, I think for me, I'm going Army. What about you, Kevin? What's your thoughts?
Go Army, beat Navy.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it. Couldn't have said it better. Go Army, beat Navy, and let's go for the over. Why not? Let's just go full. Yeah. Full tilt.
I should have. I just thought about this. I should have worn. I bought an Army sweatshirt on discount from the Army athletics store, and I only wore it to the game because I kind of feel bad wearing it in public. Like I didn't serve. I'm not like. Yeah. I'm just like, hey, it's a cool sweatshirt. I like this football team. It's no different than like an Oregon State sweatshirt or something. I think it's cool, but I feel bad wearing it, so I never have an opportunity to wear it.
That's so funny because my wife and I had that exact conversation because we were like buying. There's like special gear, maybe that's what you're referring to that they have every year. And so we bought my father-in-law this hoodie, and we're like, can we buy these hoodies? Because like when can we wear them, and like can we wear them to the game? Like so, yeah, that's funny you say that. Yeah, we found Go Army Beat Navy hoodies or beanies. Like we're like okay, that's as good as
all you got to say is you got family that served. Like then it's all.
Hey, you know what? I'm gonna find an opportunity. I pay taxes. Dang it! Like I can wear a sweatshirt. Yeah,
there you go. It's settled.
That's the ultimate booster.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Yes. Army Navy. It should be another classic, another fun one here. All right. In the books is that game. Let's move on to the first round matchups of the college football playoffs here. And let's head over and start with the Indiana and Notre Dame matchup here. I'm very curious to get your guys' take on this one. So this one opened at 7.5 and is pretty much still there. There's been only a bit of bobbing and weaving off that number in the marketplace, but it's largely there settled at the moment. Again, really no edge from what our numbers make it. We make the number 8 in favor of Notre Dame here. And this one to me, Seth, feels like kind of one of those quintessential like strength on strength situations here where Indiana's offense, generally speaking, versus Notre Dame's really stout defense. And kind of segueing or going back to the conversation we just had about talent in the Army-Navy game, I'm wondering how much that ultimately plays a role in this one here, because in the two games that Indiana has struggled with was Ohio State, highly talented, and Michigan, another highly talented team. So is that, Seth, in your opinion, maybe the kicker in this one, despite what the on paper metrics say?
Yeah, and we've been harping that kind of all season when it has been opportunities to play these bigger, like I said, blue chip ratio, top of the pile teams. We have seen them not have as much success. Now, that Ohio State game, I think, is a little tricky because if you take a couple explosive plays away, that box score looks completely different. And can Indiana, get some of that back and play here in-state rivalry? So they're not going to have to travel very far, which is obviously a big win. But you're exactly right. We have Indiana as the number 2 pass EPA team in our database, 57th against the rush. But we have Notre Dame as the number 1 pass defense and 44th best rush defense. So again, strength there for the passing defense of Notre Dame going up against the number 2 passing attack here for Indiana. And then Notre Dame, they run the ball very well, but Indiana stops the run. Notre Dame number 2 in rush EPA. Indiana is number 5 in defensive rush EPA. So again, this is going to be strength on strength, in my opinion. It is going to be rock fight doesn't feel right, but this feels like a more Big Ten game to me. The question that I have is that exact talent aspect. How much can we put on that, or should we be discounting? You can see the model is kind of right on market there. It doesn't really lean in a direction. And I'm just curious. We've seen this team bounce back after that loss and go into Purdue and just do work, and I guess, and try to put an exclamation mark on the season. And is that like, you want to hang your hat on that, but again, it's another example of them being able to do whatever they want to, whoever they want, other than these big programs. And I think that's interesting. The other thing I want to point out here is Indiana has some interesting numbers. They are 18th in defensive equal rate over expected. So like Parker was highlighting, and for a metric that we like to use, what is it kind of an average defense doing? And this team is a team that is they're the opposite of bend don't break. They are a break team. They don't let teams get to the 40, but once they do, they're 94th in our database in points per equal. So they're giving up points once teams are able to drive. So what's that actually look like here? And in this Notre Dame team where they've had offensive success, is that going to just be something they can churn out there? They're just going to fly through there, and their drives are just going to result in touchdowns and not field goals. So I tend to you're going to hear me. I'm just super chalky. Like these matchups are just like they kind of all do favor the higher seed or the better seed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, Parker, from what your numbers have from what you've seen, is this do you agree with that, or do you see any edge in this game either way?
Yeah. Again, I think these lines are pretty sharp. I try to model mine that I'm putting out this year is like setting the opening line. And I have this about Notre Dame 5.5. So I'm a little bit higher on Indiana. I was higher on Indiana in the Ohio State game. I think I had that up by about 4.5. So a miss there in terms of the mean absolute error. And against the spread. But just speaking to Indiana's power rating, I do think that what they do is sustainable. There's a couple elements that are sustainable. Obviously, Seth, you point out the echo rate warms my heart. I'm like, people saying echo is the funniest thing in the world to me, like just because it's the stupidest name for it. And it's great. I love that it's useful, and that's a lot of fun. Notre Dame's second year in a row that they have had the #1 pass defense with the injuries they've had to back there. Really, really impressive. And that rushing number being so high. I mean, think about the conversations we were having about Notre Dame's offensive line in August, where they're losing 2 NFL guys. Yeah. They have an injury in fall camp. They're starting a true freshman. And, man, they have held up a lot better than anyone expected. Really, really impressive from them. Indiana on offense, the sustainability for me, I think, is a couple points. One, early downs EPA, they're 3rd overall when the field is kind of open. And on 3rd and 4th down success, they're 8th. So it's not – sometimes you'll see a team that's good, like – I think we're talking about Western Kentucky on my show today. And like Western Kentucky is very bad on early downs, and they're great on late downs. They're like, okay, you're good on 3rd and 4th down against the Conference USA. Your offense has a problem. Like, you're not actually good. There's some cracks in the foundation there. Indiana is very, very balanced there. It's not like there's this obvious weakness of opponents that they are exploiting. Now, that being said, when did we see Indiana struggle? We saw them struggle against high talent teams, absolutely, but specifically high talent teams with disruptive defensive lines, the physicality and the pass rush. And I think the physicality of the pass rush is what you would say to explain this Notre Dame defense. You got Mills, Tuimalaka, I botched that name. We'll just skip past it. Cross and Young have just been so good. Mills and Cross last year were among the top 10 in pressures from the interior in terms of all of college football. Wow. And they've held up that performance again this year. So very, very disruptive. I think that if this holds up, Notre Dame's run defense can kind of stuff Indiana, kind of constrain them on early downs. If you're getting into these 3rd and even medium situations, you're letting this Notre Dame defensive line stunt, pin their ears back, do all sorts of weirdness, and just get after you. And I think that's going to be a really, really tough thing for Indiana to overcome. I know Rourke's been banged up at different times this year, and we'll see kind of how he handles that pass rush. I do look at this as teams as kind of mirror images. You said best on best. I have this as Indiana #2 in EPA on offense, 17th overall on defense. Notre Dame the inverse, 16th on offense, 4th overall on defense. So really, really good matchup. Slight lean towards the underdog there, but again, not a strong edge for me, just because I do think these teams are very fairly priced, and who, much like the Ohio State game, who can get that lucky break on the special teams and kind of control the game. Because Seth, I do agree on the box score. Like, that game was closer than it looked for the final score, but also Ohio State got up and just said, we're fine. Like, we're going to be okay. They, arguably didn't even want to score that last touchdown. And so did look a little bit different game state wise, but I think that's really, really important to watch here is if Indiana is forced to overcome a multi-score deficit, like, it's not happening. If Notre Dame can get out by even 10 points, it's not happening. Right. And so that's what you're really banking on is kind of those early game state for Notre Dame here. It's hard for me to see or disagree with it. Really, a lot of that, or what the numbers are kind of pointing to, and to kind of put a bow on the talent and the defensive line thing. The difference between these two teams, Notre Dame is number 9th in the country in talent composite rating, and Indiana's number 57th. Yeah. And 16 of Notre Dame's
58 4 and 5-star guys are on the defensive side and on the D line, linebacker or a DL specifically. So to your point, Parker, like they got guys, guys coming after him, so it's really difficult for me. And Indiana and Kurt Signetti they have to scheme up and draw basically the perfect game plan for this one, or else it might be another long day for them. So winner in this one goes on to play Georgia. So it should be hopefully a good matchup to kick off the first round here. So
yeah, and the market on this has pretty much been static. There was like 8s for a second, and then everyone's just sitting at 7.5.
Yeah.
So
you wonder if Notre Dame's schedule is coming into it. That's kind of the Notre Dame Twitter was talking about. We've dominated everybody we played, and you're like, well, who have you?
Yeah,
who has that been? And you wonder
name drop somebody, please.
There, yeah.
No,
that was old me on Twitter. Now we're on X. I don't deal with it anymore.
Okay,
that's fine.
Gotcha. Okay,
good for you. Yeah. All right.
I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like this could get out of hand, and I that's obviously recency bias. I'm very biased to that kind of that analysis that we've done, which is the talent disparity, and we've just seen the two data points where that of course comes into play. But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
I'd love to
see Indiana have success. It feels like this is Notre Dame's kind of chance, but yeah. All right. Should be hopefully will be a good one. So, all right. Before we move on, appreciate you guys tuning in. This will be up on our YouTube page as well tomorrow around noon Mountain Time. Don't forget to like the video, please. Please subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't. We're here doing these weekly shows for you throughout the college football playoffs, and we'll be on doing the NFL show as well. So, moving on, let's talk about SMU and the Penn State matchup. So Parker, I was able to tune into your show. I think it was yesterday or Monday, I forget, where you and the guys were previewing all the first round matchups, and there was basically consensus amongst you guys, and you were all on Penn State or just really liked what your guys' numbers were showing for Penn State here. So, and I wanted to be contrarian a little bit here, but I'm struggling on to find an angle or to find some numbers that allow me to be contrarian here, similar to the talent issue we just talked about here. How much do you think that plays a role in this one, Parker? And I know this is not something that's really like a quantitative element, but it's been the scuttlebutt basically since the start of the year, and basically every year since Franklin has been at Penn State, and that is his inability really to come through in the clutch and win big games, win versus ranked opponents. So how do you kind of juxtapose those couple things with what your numbers say, and how do you think this game plays out?
Yeah, I think the scientific way we talk about this is unobserved heterogeneity. What are we not capturing in the numbers that is there? The technical term for that is also vibes, right? Like the vibes matter a little bit, and we have to incorporate those. It's interesting with Franklin because I feel like it's a weird almost selection bias because he is under the spotlight so much, playing top 5 teams so often. But then there's also kind of that meme that he knows the line, and he scores that last touchdown to cover as well. So those feel kind of diametrically opposed, and yet he gets both of those there. This is interesting. Check me on this. I'm sure you have this in front of you. SMU's top 25 composite, or are they top there? I think that might be including next year's recruits.
I have them at 25.
Yeah. So they're top 25, and they've done a great job at the transfer portal. It's really interesting, the perception of SMU. Like, this is not the Sonny Dykes SMU team. Like, hey, we're going to sling it. We're going to score 70. Although against TCU this year, they almost did. They're a very defensive minded team, and they have a legitimate couple NFL guys on that defensive line. They do have some talent there. They're 5th in EPA per rush on defense, 14th in EPA per dropback. Really, really stout defensively, and that's given the offense some room to grow throughout the season. We've seen them, be a little tumultuous at times, figuring out the quarterback situation and all that. And when they're gelling, it's the defense that's giving raise to the offense and setting them up for good situations. They're 17th in starting field position on offense there, and you could see that from the defense getting some turnovers and helping them out. That being said, it does feel like there's a little bit of a mismatch for kind of what they want to do. They give up they're 10th in dropback success rate allowed. They're 14th in EPA per dropback. So allowing a little more explosiveness than success there, a little bit prone to the explosiveness. And that's what the Andy Kotelnicki offense wants to do for Penn State. They want to line Tyler Warren up at center and run triple play action and find him wide open in the end zone, right? Just scheming up these diabolical plays to get those big explosives. So whereas, SMU's been good against the success rate, they are a little more vulnerable to those big plays. And I think that's going to be a problem in the pass game and, figuring out how they can mitigate that best threat for or that best option for Penn State. Then on the offensive side of the ball, they are passing much better than they're rushing, 9th to 39th in the pass to the rush. But Penn State is, top 10 in both. They are really, really solid, great at finishing drives defensively. Penn State is 6th in points per echo, and Penn State's 20th on early downs EPA, holding opponents to negative value on those early down plays. So you can see if this kind of becomes a rock fight, that almost works for Penn State because they want to say, we're just going to grind your offense to a halt. We know we'll dial up the explosives. Like we know the diabolical play is coming, but I don't think the talent gap is as big as the perception of the talent gap is, especially with regards to SMU's defense. And the cold weather this is the one I've circled as like, this might be an issue. I kind of joked right when they announced, hey, we're going to do, on campus first round games. And you knew like, okay, Penn State is not going to be top 4, but they're going to be in the playoff. Like that's just how the schedule is going to break out here. But it's kind of a situation of like, oh, you're not locked in Happy Valley with like you're not locked in here with me. I'm not locked in here with you, right? Like whatever that saying is that I just totally botched there. But it is a kind of like welcome to the Thunderdome. It's going to be cold. They're hoping for some bad weather and kind of saying you're going to have to come up here and you're not going to run fast. We're going to hit you hard. And I think all of that is just, again, anything you can think of kind of outside of the numbers as well just tilts towards Penn State here.
So what do you make this number? Because if we don't regress to the market, our raw model number here is 11.5 for Penn State.
Yeah, mine is one of those where I said, hey, if I'm off by like 9 points, I'm like, oh, something's going on. I'm Penn State by 2.5, and I don't trust that farther than I can do it. So that in fact is so far off where I'm like, nope, I'm clearly missing something about like cross conference. I don't love this at all. Maybe that's a little skittishness about SMU for me, and I'm not trusting the numbers there. But yeah, that's one that had me scratching my head a little bit. So if you just blindly trust the number, you'd say SMU as a dog, and maybe if you believe the rock fight narrative, it's gonna be a little closer than it feels. Is probably the best case for SMU there.
Yeah, and I mean these teams have had very different schedules as well, and we've kind of shit on the ACC a lot on the show, and so it does feel like Penn State's had a much tougher path here. I agree totally. The defensive numbers here, I think where SMU is going to have a chance, right? They're going to have to really step up defensively and complicate what Penn State's going to do. But I have to say, recency bias here, that Oregon game, if you're a Penn State fan, this feels a little bit like the stars are kind of aligned. You lost a tough shootout to Oregon, the number 1 team, but then you get to play SMU at home. If you win this, you get to play Boise. You're going to be favored in both of those games, probably. This is your shot, right? So, this if Franklin can ever, beat this narrative, to me, this is,
it has to be chance. Now. Right.
Yeah.
It almost feels like, okay, if we're like, don't read too much into this. In 8th grade, I had to wrestle a girl.
Okay.
Just not like casually. Like I was on the wrestling team.
Oh yeah,
she was on the wrestling team.
You got to do what you got to do.
And it's a lose-lose situation, right? Like
it's fair.
And not that's far too that I'm walking on thin ice all over this here, but like it's kind of a situation where like middle school me, if we go in that world and we sit there like, okay, I either win this convincingly and no one cares, or I lost to a girl and I can't go to middle school on Monday, right? And a little bit there's that element with SMU and Arizona State of just saying like, hey, this is a mismatch of opponents, like you should win these both handily. And it feels like, if they do nothing less than get to the Final Four, that's going to be held against them, even though it's hard to win these games. And those are 2 good teams.
Yeah. To me, I think back to that Louisville game where SMU just couldn't keep up. And it feels like that to me is more of the game state we're going to see here, where Penn State's going to be more of the Louisville, if not a Super Saiyan version of that. And that game state really just kind of sticks out in my mind. And I don't know. It's tough to trust this one. We're putting quite a lot of weight on the market, obviously, with such, with so many eyeballs on so few games. We think these are going to be pretty efficient numbers, but it's just, if this game gets out of hand, it does feel like one of the ones we're going to look back and say, yeah, that one.
Yeah, we saw it. Yeah, saw it coming.
Yeah.
All right, Parker. The people want to know. Don't bury the lead here, man.
I did win, and again, I want to apologize. I wasn't suggesting anything, bigger than that. My middle school embarrassment there.
Good. No.
But yeah, it's
and a win is a win. A win
win's
is a win.
And
Yeah.
look, I was 500 in my career. I needed all the wins I could get, so I will not complain about it.
Oh, shut up. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Yeah, SMU, Penn State. Seth, you mentioned it. Winner goes on to play Boise. Yeah, hopefully the stars seem to be aligning for Penn State. We'll see if it's in the cards for them or not.
Any thoughts, Kevin, here for you?
Not additionally
up and
to
down. Open at 8.5, down to 7.5, back to 8.5. So it's just like
yeah. Pinnacle's at 9 right now. When last I checked, so it's kind of hovering around there. But when you look at the quarterback play too, for me, like they're actually Jennings and Aller are not all that dissimilar on a kind of a raw e-paper dropback basis. I see Jennings at number 10 and Aller at number 8. So both very solid, good quarterbacks in their own right. But again, to the point about which team, what's the environment, the weather plus the other team's defensive makeup is a better setup. And it's definitely set up better for Drew Aller. There's no doubt about it.
And Mo Bamba, when it's like 25 degrees out and like 110,000 people like yelling at you, that's got to feel a little bit different coming from Texas.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. No doubt about it. Yeah. They're used to playing in hot and humid southern. What part of Texas do they play in?
SMU is in Dallas, just
Dallas.
right north Texas. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So it's they ain't in Kansas anymore, metaphorically speaking. They ain't in Texas anymore. So, all right. That's we got 2 matchups down, 2 more to go. Let's roll through these, boys. We got the next one up is Clemson versus Texas. Winner of this one goes on to play ASU. So this one technically opened at 8.5 at circa, but it basically almost immediately jumped to 10.5 and 11. Most of the books are kind of there right now as well. So I guess technically, at least you could say there's no market love for Clemson at the moment. This is, of the 4 first-round matchups, this is the largest spread of the slate. So Texas, though, Parker, it's one of those kind of funny things to me. Like first year in the SEC, and they make the SEC championship game, but if you look back, kind of just in hindsight, 2020 vision type of thing, they don't currently have any wins versus current top 25 teams. So you hear some scuttlebutt about, well, kind of what have they done, so to speak, and we go back to the conversation about SMU and the ACC schedule, like same kind of argument for Clemson in my opinion. But for the game state and the game script for this one, Texas defense again is really going to potentially cause some problems for Clemson. And if Cade Klubnik and that crew don't play basically a damn near perfect game, and or Clemson's defense can't generate some high variance plays, turnovers. I think they're number 2 in turnover margin this year in the country, or tied for number 2. That is, what is the path for Clemson to pull out a cover and or win here, if that's possible?
Yeah. This one's really, really interesting. I think this is the one I have the strongest feeling on, just because this number got so big. So I've got this at about 8 here, and I think we just look at coaching advantage and talk about Dabo in the postseason with time to prepare, like he's been there before. And Clemson does have a lot of talent. That offensive line is stout and experienced up and down. And Jake Brenningstool is an NFL guy. You wonder about the health of Phil Maffa per se. I know that they kind of admitted he was a little banged up. And you looked, and some of his numbers don't make sense. I was tweeting out that graph of like missed tackles force and yards after contact. And he's pretty good at yards after contact, but he doesn't force missed tackles often. And you're like, oh, okay, there's some physicality there that maybe is a little bit lacking, just because is that injury, is that scheme, what's going on? That Garrett Riley offense really wants to generate those big plays. You see that in the split from EPA and success rate. They're 29th in success rate, 21st in opponent adjusted EPA per play. So they are more explosive than they are successful there, but they're going to have to run the ball. And that's a tall task against Texas.
So not only Maffa, but isn't their backup? Didn't he also get injured last game too? And he's potentially out. Haynes, excuse me.
Yeah, I think he went out too. So I think there's a couple, we got a couple weeks guys can get dinged up and healthy, there is some uncertainty there for sure. Looking at this Texas offense is just fascinating, because Sark is great, and you see NFL teams running his stuff on a weekly basis, and clearly has a lot going. Texas cannot shake this bug where they cannot finish drives. They're 9th in quality possession rate and echo rate, and they're 43rd in points per echo. That's better than last year, but that's a very low bar. We saw that plague them. We knew that was going to be an issue. I think the Alabama game, they won by 10, and they probably left 16 points on the board, and you were like,
right.
Yep. You got to be able to get some of that there. And then we saw against Washington, they even had a chance at the very end and couldn't drive it home. And at some point you're starting to ask, okay, is it a Sark thing? Is it a wide receiver thing? And you're like, it might just be Quinn Ewers processing in the red zone. Like that just might be a thing that we're dealing with. You know, he hasn't taken the step that we've hoped, obviously really young, a lot of football left to play for him. But you know, even though he's been in college forever, he's still very young. I think that's the path for Clemson there is like, can we press this advantage in the plus in the red zone and keep Texas to field goals instead of touchdowns, not give up the big stupid play, really force these receivers to make separation, really force Quinn Ewers to pass in tight windows in a way that he has not been able to do. You know, Gunnar Helm, really good weapon. They go to him a lot. Can we kind of stifle him as well and kind of box them in? And then can we run the ball consistently? That's the piece that's a little bit harder here. So the path for the upset for Clemson just feels a little bit more tenuous. Now, keeping it close, I think that finishing drive's ability for Texas is really, really going to stand out here, and the kind of preparation angle that goes in favor of Dabo. So this feels like too big of a number. This might be one that, you know, get egg on my face and look back, but I think that this would be stronger for me to say, I think Clemson at 11, this doesn't get to that big of a score.
Yeah, and this opened at 8.5, and it's got bought all the way up. And there's retail books that are getting cute. I mean, you can get 11.5s, 12s. I mean, they're trying
to get 12s now.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think if you go blind, like Dabo with a double digit spread,
Dabo with time. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. 12s switched. Sorry. Yesterday was the last, the 12s got eaten up, but 11.5 over at BetMGM, just kind of daring you to take it. I think, I'll add to that. You know, I don't necessarily think Clemson can win here, but from a covering standpoint, I think if you're Texas, we're in our database, they're 18th in pass EPA, 70th in rush EPA, but Clemson is 15th against the pass and 105th against the rush. If I'm going to do something, and they showed this in that Georgia game, they were willing to run the ball for negative yards and, you know, negative EPA plays. If that's kind of the pathway here to beat Clemson on the ground, it looks like they are willing to run the ball and kind of switch from a team that is, you know, pass first to maybe run a little bit more. That's going to eat up clock, right? And to your point, Parker, like if that is something new for them, does that exacerbate this kind of, you know, them not being able to finish drives, or is that when they try to flip the switch for Ewers to throw whatever and they can't do it? And we saw that kind of game script play out in the Georgia game. So I agree that this number is getting to heights here where how high really can it get? Where we've moved through a number of key numbers here. So 11 seems to be the number because Circa now is at 10.5. So someone bought the 11.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think if Texas ran more or schemed up some different types of stuff, maybe even with Arch Manning last week against Georgia, I think that game maybe looks a little bit different. That was kind of my thought going into that game last week, is that they were really going to try to attack Georgia on the ground and even dial up some cute little fancy packages with Arch Manning, but they didn't even really try that. And an incredibly small sample size, obviously, here, but when they've trotted Arch Manning out there, particularly to run the ball, they've been quite successful.
But to go a little game theory there, I mean, Sark has said as much. Like, we don't want to put everything on tape. And this, I hate this. This is contrarian to everything I believe about college football. Didn't really matter last week, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you sacrificed everything to win that game, you would have fulfilled your own destiny and done that. So even in this game here, can Texas win this without running out the Arch package? Like, ideally, you want that out there in the championship game, right? And saying, hey, I haven't had to use this the entire time. I haven't had to break the glass, and now I can do that stuff. And so that at least I think speaks to kind of the point of like, hey, if Texas can be vanilla and just win this, I think they're going to try to not show anything that they don't have to here.
Well, and let me remind you, they did have one package where they showed Arch with the fake 4th down quarterback sneak. So that was pretty fancy. Yeah, we got to give credit where credit is due. It worked, and it worked. And more importantly, it worked.
I suppose so, yeah. But so I that's one thing, just kind of a side story to the main plot, so to speak, that I'll be kind of keeping my eye on to see how Texas can try to attack that. So we'll see. I mean, this potential. I mean, do you guys think that this one as well has the potential makings of a? Or it doesn't sound like it. I think you guys collectively are thinking 12 or 11 might be too much here. So you guys really don't see this one getting out of hand. It sounds like.
No, I expect this to be close. I'd be on Clemson here.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to see the game state in which all of a sudden Texas can just do whatever they want, however they want. It's not like Clemson's a bad team. Clemson is a good team, and when we've talked a lot about quote unquote dudes in this, live today. Like Clemson has dudes. Like people forget that because they're not who they were 4 years ago or whatever. But this is still a highly recruited team with really talented 4 and 5 star recruits. So this isn't a fall off there, and I people I think may forget that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned at the start, but you can obviously see there on the screen. We don't show any edge on it, and we make we're right at market as well. So should be an interesting one. I don't know. We'll see. We got 3 down, 1 more to go, boys, and then we'll talk about some CFP playoffs and bracket angle stuff. So, last but not least, first round matchup. Let's talk about Tennessee and Ohio State. Winner of this one plays Oregon. Market is currently at 7.5. We make the number 8. So again, no real edge case for us in this one. Seth, open-ended question. How much concern do you have for Ohio State, or because of what happened last week with Michigan, or was that the outlier? I think Tennessee, how they're structured and how they might want to attack Ohio State is going to be very similar to what Michigan did, right? Michigan can't throw the ball. They haven't been able to throw the ball basically all year. I think Warren attempted, or you dropped back like 13 times or something like that. Nico is at least a little more capable, a bit. But that is definitely, if you're Tennessee, you got to be just like gawking at the game tape from that one and just like, okay, guys, here's the script. So again, I'll bring it back. Outlier or concern for Ohio State in this one.
Yeah, I mean, now to just briefly touch on that game, I think Michigan has gotten better week in and week out, and they've had a lot of moving parts, a quarterback, and in a number of different positions. So, you have that added aspect where they're kind of just getting better in, week out, and then it's the biggest game on their schedule, and this is like a religious event for them, so they're going to do
rivalry week, but weird shit can happen.
Yeah. And I agree. If you're Tennessee, I couldn't agree more. You want a very similar game state. When we look at the offensive side of the ball, this isn't as, isn't exactly the same as Ohio State, Michigan. We have Ohio State as number 2 in our weighted EPA offensive metric. Tennessee is 53rd. On defense, though, this is where Tennessee, I think, can shine. We show them 27th against the pass, 4th against the rush. But I think ultimately, if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to finish their drives. We have them in 29th in echo rate over expected here. But we have Ohio State as number 4 in points per echo on defense. So they're not allowing teams to finish those drives. And in my opinion, that is what Tennessee is going to have to do. And it's going to have to look something similar to that Michigan-Ohio State game. Can they do that, though? Are we going to get that kind of anemic performance from Ohio State after they've had, because they didn't play last week, right? They get like an extra bye.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, triple bye almost.
It's bad for vibes and it's bad for perception, but is it probably a better thing that Ohio State didn't have to go play the rematch of a playoff team?
I wonder, they're going to have to do it again. Probably,
I think there's an argument there. Is like, you're going to have to beat them. You don't want to lose to them again, and have all that issue. So I think there's an argument to be made there. I mean, Tennessee's so interesting because, sort of like I mentioned with SMU, like they're a defensive team, right? Even with the Heupel offense, just because they have a younger quarterback now, and the vision was there. We knew the secondary was a little weak, but we knew that the defensive line should be good enough to give them a long leash, and that seems to be bearing out in kind of our numbers here. And my EPA numbers are very similar. There, I have Tennessee about 26th on offense, 2nd on defense, adjusting for opponent. Ohio State's 4th on offense and 1st on defense. Where the Ohio State offense kind of goes awry is really just that they aren't that much more explosive than they are successful. And so that's really where you're going to see that kind of dimension of, hey, can we get the ball to our playmakers? We have this stable of wide receivers. Why are we running it on first downs between the tackles against these physical defenses? And want to see some variety there from Ohio State. I think we could say very confidently this is the best first round game by like a pretty good amount here, just from how interesting Ohio State has been up and down the season, and how Tennessee on offense seems to have this potential that they haven't necessarily tapped into. I mean, there's been a couple times, I think Nico's big time throw rate is only 4.3 this season. But he's had those opportunities. Think about the Arkansas game. He had a ball that, I mean, just a hair, just a little bit more anticipation. That's a touchdown. They win that game. No problem. And so you can see that he's a work in progress, but he does have the talent to hit some of those. And frankly, with this hypo offense, we know that they want to exploit one-on-one matchups. Indiana got into this a little bit, but you can pick on these guys in isolation in Ohio State's defense here. They are, third in EPA per dropback. Jim Knowles is great at making adjustments, and their defensive line, and specifically the edge rush, is super disruptive. But those cornerbacks in isolation are prone to those pass interference penalties. And if you give hypo 4 or 5 of those in a game, man, like that's all they need to kind of get super pointsy here, which I have this as a very low total. Looking at this, doing some math, 40 something, which is just, low 40s here. I think the defenses should dominate, but if Tennessee can kind of flip the script and steal a couple scores and get this pointsy, I think that they could really put some pressure on Ohio State's secondary, and then make Will Howard have to make the consistent plays to keep them up.
Yeah, a lower scoring game would certainly favor Tennessee in this one. Do you agree? And the market hasn't moved a ton, like anywhere from 48 to 47.5 down to like 46.5 now. So at least some early movement suggesting lower scoring game. But that's gotta play into the hands if that actually comes to fruition. Favor Tennessee. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Just because the more opportunities you give Ohio State to make mistakes, it feels like the more they will acquiesce.
This game does very much feel like if Alabama could play the 32nd ranked NFL team or whatever, this feels like the first time we're able to kind of get some of these, like, what if a Big Ten team could play a meaningful game against the SEC? So I'm here for it. At least no matter what here, I'm excited to just get the result of this.
Yeah, I mean, to Parker's point, I think this one opened at 7.5 now. I guess Indiana and Notre Dame also have the same spread as well, but are you guys surprised, generally speaking? Number one, Parker, you mentioned a couple games where your numbers are a little off from market, but for first round matchups, and maybe this is a good segue into just the broader CFP landscape in general, with how the first round matchups, how the market is rather digesting this first round matchups, and there are no one score spreads. Is that at all surprising to either of you guys?
I don't think it's super surprising to me, just from think about the conversation of best versus most deserving and all the nonsense we've had about the selection, all that. Clearly we know that some of these teams are flawed and limited in certain ways. And it's, do they deserve access to get on the field and be able to play, or, we have the power rated lower. So I think that kind of speaks to some of this. And it doesn't feel like anybody in these first round matchups is really there outside of the position they put themselves in. People played themselves in, in looking at the buys, Arizona State and Boise, got some bounces and were better than their competition. But you look at Tennessee came up short in key moments. Ohio State came up short in key moments. Clemson didn't look great against quality competition, but beat all the bad teams on their schedule. Penn State clearly towards the top, but again, couldn't overcome that Oregon team. And so you look, everybody's kind of played themselves into these slots here. And so it does make sense to say okay, the way the landscape broke, there are good but flawed teams on both sides here. And then clearly there's a divide between the guys who got in versus, the best power rated teams.
Yeah. And I think also something, going through all these numbers and, preparing here, you also remember that the committee has a lot of these stats. I don't know if they have ACL rate. I hope they do. But, so you end up looking at this and you're like, the higher rated seed is just ever so slightly better in pretty much every single one of these metrics. So, I'm not saying it's the only way that they're seeding these teams, because like Parker just highlighted, it has a lot to do with how they finish and their record and all these things. But, they're obviously are looking at some of this stuff. And, I think it bears here that, yeah, then you just end up with the better teams being favored. And, in this case, power ratings just kind of, the math works out. Yeah, you don't have any, you have some pretty long shots. It feels extremely chalky to me, which is very dangerous. Our model likes pretty much, it doesn't really like, but it leans in those directions of pretty much all the favorites. I can kind of create a mental model that validates this. Clemson seems like maybe the one that's a little tricky, but I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep this conversation going in a slightly different angle here. So let's pull up the bracket and talk and zoom out a little bit here. So take off the maybe more analytically inclined hat for a moment and put on your Nostradamus hats for a couple seconds here. So seeing how the bracket is shaking out, or where the seedings are here, I guess let's just get into some good old fashioned kind of predictions here. And then I want to talk about also some, potential, or some sims that we ran and some potential value on the board that might be left still. So Parker, as the, again, first and inaugural guest of the show here, what is your visceral feeling for who got the best break in the bracket, and who do you like to be the matchup for the championship game?
Yeah, so I think it's almost a fact, inarguable at this point, that Penn State benefited the most from losing. Just they are getting SMU and then Boise. Obviously, you've got to overcome Georgia or Notre Dame, and so that's a pretty big hurdle here. Oregon State, Oregon, a team, they get a team they've either beaten in Ohio State or a Tennessee team where on offense shouldn't really be able to match up with them. So that feels kind of nice. And I do think that, a team like Arizona State, I'm not optimistic about their chances of moving forward. Georgia got a little bit of a rough deal here because I think Notre Dame is going to be a hard out. I think Georgia should be able to beat them, but it does feel like Notre Dame is underseeded at a 7. That being said, I don't want any action against Kirby Smart in the playoff. My prior is still that Kirby Smart ends up with the trophy in his hands this year. That's where I've been since beginning of the season, even when they lost to Alabama. I think that they can pull that out. So
I haven't heard much about it. I don't know if either of you guys have, but the potential, the Carson Beck injury situation, like how much does that modify your prior, and what does that do to that team?
He is out and they go with this power run situation. I mean, Carson Beck is top 10, maybe top 5. I haven't run it this week, of most drops or yards lost to drops. Just if you assumed every receiver caught the ball and fell down, Carson Beck has really struggled with drops. The kind of vertical offense that they've had and wanted has just not been there this year because they don't have the athletes. I mean, obviously you lose Brock Bowers, you lose Ladd McConkey, like you don't have these get out of jail free cards, and they really struggled to move around that. So you wonder if getting out of their head on offense a little bit by necessity, by being forced to, doesn't help them a little bit, honestly, kind of play a brand of football that, one, no one really has a lot of film on, and two, is more inclined to, hey, we're just going to out talent you, which is the advantage they have in this bracket.
Yeah. Okay. Seth, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm taking on my Nostradamus hat and I'm putting on the Sims hat here. I mean, that's what we do here, right? So I ran the Sims. We ran the Sims. We talked about them a little bit last week, but yeah, we identified Penn State and Notre Dame before last week, and now sitting here, those feel like really good spots, and we've seen CLV on both of those. And yeah, I couldn't agree with Parker more. I think Notre Dame feels like a steal. We're still showing edge here, basically a 7-point edge.
Yeah, let's pull the Sims up here so we can see, so the good people can see what we got going on.
So
here.
There's the 7th seed, our composite, and this comes from Massey Peabody, BTB, our power rating, and SP Plus. Those composite ratings for the power rating there. They're the 7th seed. We show them as the number 1 team, and we show their odds to win it all at plus 465. You can current best market in the number plus 850. So we show a ton of value. I agree, George is good. I think there's a ton of questions though with Beck. That could be good or bad. Yeah. I hear you there. And then Penn State, clearly at this current number, it's obviously the value's gone, but I think we got, what did we give out? Plus 1,000?
I got plus 2,000.
Or yeah, well, preseason. I think when we ran it last week. So yeah, I don't know. I like those. I like Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has kind of been able to kind of fly under the radar. I'm curious, Parker, where do you have them in adjusted EPA for Notre Dame?
In terms of in terms of power rating, which is factors in a couple other things too. I have Notre Dame fourth, but I have Oregon first, and then I've got Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Georgia all within about a point. In that order. In terms of adjusted EPA, let me scroll. StreamYard always makes my computer just do a little happy dance. So give me 1 second to pull this up.
Yeah, no problem at all.
In net adjusted opponent adjusted EPA per play, I also have them fourth, 16th on offense, fourth on defense.
Okay, so given that quote unquote weaker schedule, they still have like dominated teams and had very successful per play basis there. So I don't know. That to me, I think that's where the value bet. Who will actually win? I don't know. Ohio State feels like maybe there's some value there. You're buying them at the bottom. I guess let's say that. In my opinion, I think you're getting a discount. This was I think the preseason betting favorite. So obviously being able to get them now at plus 550 is probably not all that different than what you could get them at that point. But it does feel like you're buying a bottom here. You can see there is some value on the dog. So any of you sicko degens out there, you can get, Indiana plus 4,000. There's a tiny bit of value. SMU for crazy enough plus 5,000. ASU plus 6,600. Does that interest you, Kevin?
No, it does not actually.
I want to root for them. I want to root for them. I don't want to hold stock in them. I think that the argument for Ohio State, like buying them at the bottom, absolutely, is also just like the arc of college football tends towards what's funniest. And Ohio State winning the national championship this year after all of this nonsense would be very funny. So,
okay, just one more quick convo on one of the teams here. We didn't talk about Oregon really at all in that conversation or during any of the previews because they have a bye, obviously. But I've heard basically we've talked about them on this show that they seem to be one of those teams, Parker, where just week in and week out, they just handle their business. And like, there's very little controversy around them. They're playing very well. Number one seed the entire season, pretty much. And then once the CFP rankings came out and the bracket and all that, like, oh, Oregon got screwed. Like, oh, they got the hose job, like no benefit or no kickback basically for being the number one seed. So I don't know if I agree with that part per se, but what is your feel for that team generally? And I hate to say it, but RP Pac-12, first year leaving the Pac-12, and then you are the number one consensus seed going into the CFP ranking. Like it's going to break my heart if they ended up winning it for that element alone. But is their chance as good as anybody else's to win?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the biggest highlight there is just like looking at Dylan Gabriel's numbers last year and this year, like his big time throw rate is down. His turnover worthy plate rate is also down though. His average depth of target is down from like 10.2 to 6.9. Very clearly Will Stein and Dan Lanning have a good sense of who is on their team and what they want to do with them. And I think that is having a strong sense of identity is very difficult in college football and kind of knowing what you can and can't do. I think they had to work through that. I mean, obviously the Idaho and Boise results were not good and not what you want out of a championship team. But when it mattered against Ohio State, they put some stuff on film, they moved some stuff around and were able to kind of annoy Ohio State in a way that I don't think Ohio State was necessarily prepared for there. So I don't think that they are anywhere near this kind of like certainty, wagon, really like overwhelming favorite here. They're fifth in the EPA numbers. Their defense is down at ninth. And they're not, first by a huge margin. In the power rating, I think they're only ahead of that group by about a point as well. So it's not like in years past where we've had a clear consensus number one. I think that they struggled early and then won against Ohio State and then just took care of business. That Penn State game was a little closer for comfort than I think, really you'd want if you're kind of expecting Oregon to come in and be dominant. I did mention, like the Tennessee Ohio State matchup, I think is actually favorable either way for Oregon there to get there. And then, you're hoping Arizona State or Clemson can do something crazy, and you don't have to face Texas just because you want, maybe some of those overseeded teams in there. But I'm not as optimistic about Oregon just because I don't think they're as dominant. I think they're resourceful and I think they're super talented, but I think it's going to be hard fought kind of. I don't think we're going to see like Oregon just blow out this bracket and win the championship.
Yeah, I think a couple look ahead lines for them, just because people love to do that these days. I think it was 4.5 against Tennessee, and I think 2.5 against Ohio State. So to your point, yeah, it's not like the market's going to have a bunch of love for them either way. So I don't know. It's going to be very. I'm one. Yeah, my pick is my pick is Oregon. I'm going chalk.
Oh,
you said it feels chalky.
Very chalky.
And yeah, and not controversial at all. But yeah, I just think kind of for some of the reasons that Parker mentioned, but also just the vibes, man. The vibes are high with the team, in my opinion. So it's just as much about vibes as it is what the numbers say, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't have any positions on them, especially now. But yeah, I think they can definitely win it all.
Have you seen the Dan Lanning Inglourious Bastards like hype video that he did for Washington? Okay, when you're done with this, please Google Dan Lanning Inglourious Bastards. They are on. When you're talking vibes, these are some of the craziest vibes I've made.
Really, I missed this. Okay, I'm gonna have to check this out.
No spoilers here, but it is maybe the best 4 minutes. I've seen. He's just on some next level psychological warfare, and these dudes are ready to go. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. So. Vibes do seem high for Oregon, and they do seem to be peaking at the right time. This is a team we've struggled with early in the season. We bet against, the classic UCLA, who was just the ATS slayer this season. But Oregon struggled in the beginning, and then they've kind of just done what they need to do, get better week in, week out, and they do seem to be peaking right now. So could be destiny.
Could be. All I know is I'm ready for the matchups to be here. We still got basically another week. Another 8 or 9 days before they actually kick off from when we're recording this, but it's finally here, and when it is here, it's going to be a glorious couple of days. So Seth, good as always, man. Parker, very, very much appreciate your time and joining us this week. I want people to hear from the horse's mouth. There's whatever you're cool and comfortable with, man. Where can people find you again, and what do you got going on right now?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed chatting with you as well. You can find me on Twitter at StatsOWar. You can find me Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern on the BetUS College Football Show. Just search BetUS NCAA and it'll pop up on YouTube there. And then NCAAinsiders.com. I have all the previews. You want to get into look ahead lines, you can go to the matchup generator and start to compare across some schools as well. So check those out as well.
Okay. All right. It's been real. We'll be back probably a little over a week from now. I don't think we'll have another show until after the first round of games go. But nonetheless, it's been real. Boys and girls, appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you.
Take care.